One, and we were going to roll out some odd news after we finished up. We had said when we finished up with the interview with Debbie Akers and talking about the chamber auction coming up on the 20th, correct? 21st, sorry. 21st, a few tickets left.
Yep.
All right. And we talked about we wanted to do something for 9/11. So we've been listening to some music to pick out a couple songs we could play.
Exactly.
We found a couple, and it was tough because most of them are like the
Is my work working?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, your work.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like the traditional Lee Greenwood song and stuff, but it doesn't really kind of fit with the format that we have. But we think we found a very nice song by the Eagles and one by the Imagine Dragons that were both from 9/11.
Kind of two different genres, but, I think they both have a good message.
Yeah.
So
it was a tragic day in American history. I know, and I want to ask you where you were. I know I haven't really... it ends up being kind of surreal because it was something that I saw on television, but that I never had a personal connection with by not knowing anybody in my life that's a first responder or even somebody that was lost somebody or was directly affected by it. So that's kind of a different perspective. But the thing that really hit me was when I walked out. I had company visiting me from out of town, and I walked out of my bedroom and I'm crossing the living room, and they're both sitting on my couch, and I kind of glance over them, with that morning. And they're both bawling on the couch. I mean, they are just crying, and they're staring at the television. And I'm like, what? And, I didn't want to say, they're upset. I don't want to say anything, right? Well, what are they looking at? And I turn around, and there it is on the TV with the Twin Towers smoking.
Exactly.
And that's, at the moment, it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, my God.
Yeah, you're right. It's surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what it is. And I know that, I've got this... I guess history has got generational benchmarks, and the 9/11 event definitely was a generational benchmark. And if I look at my life, there were two in my life. One was when JFK was assassinated, and I can remember that day and the events of that day. And the other one was the 9/11.
All right, you're a little quiet. So I'm going to move your mic down. You bring it up a little bit closer to your mouth. Yeah, the actual mic. You moved the spit screen, but not the microphone itself. There you go. All right. Now you go. Try it there. I just didn't want it to crackle over the air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there you go. Now we got you, because you're saying some cool stuff, and I want to make sure everybody can hear.
Okay, all right. Well, I think, almost all generations have what I call generational benchmarks, that they reset the time when they start thinking about what happened. And, you go back to my grandparents, it definitely had been probably World War I. My parents were World War II. In my case, I think there were two. One of them was when JFK was assassinated. I was 12 years old at the time, and the other one was 9/11. And what I mean by that is you hear where people say time stood still, and it really did. Our lives changed dramatically after that particular date. And I don't care what you were doing or where you were, I think the country came to a halt. And in my case, I was actually in the shower, and Loretta came in and says, "You got to get out here and see this." And it was around 6:30 or so in the morning. And you're right, it was on TV, and you just sit there and you're dumbfounded.
Yeah.
You just saying, "Oh man, what's going on?" And
especially in our country, because
yeah.
we haven't experienced really a lot of the terrorist attacks and the senseless bombings that they have in Europe. Where they just target a bar and blow it up.
Exactly.
So we weren't used to.
No.
We're not used to that. You could never get used to that, and you're horrified that something like that. Somebody could do something like that.
And really, about the same time, I get a phone call from my corporate office. Because I was in the investment business and ran an operation, and so I immediately was told, you need to get into the office. We got a conference call coming up, so we can kind of give you a feel of what's happening from our perspective, because obviously the markets were shutting down. And I think a couple of things. First of all, I got there, did what I needed to do, but the phones were silent. I mean, very few people called in, I think, because the public was just dumbfounded. In shock. And the other thing is, at that time, I had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so Loretta and I, said, okay, how up to that point, they'd been isolated from it. But once they got to school and everything else, how do you talk about this? And I think there, again, it's just the truth. I mean, you just like most things, even though they're that young. And then I thought about, after the fact, we were talking earlier that I've got 5 people in my family that are first responders. I've got 2 that are police officers and 3 that are firemen in one form or another in various agencies. And these are the people that were really affected, and your heart goes out to them even stronger when you've got that community that's inside your family. And I think, I believe that we don't thank our first responders enough.
And with this particular instance, there are people, I just in a few weeks ago in the news about some of the first responders that are still having health problems due to the toxic fumes that they were subjected to as a first responder.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it is, not only from the environmental aspects, but also the PTSD. And I mean, it's a bigger than just the people whose lives were lost that day. The families that were affected and the organizations that were affected. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
How about the people? Imagine this for because we don't think about it, is on the backside about it, in the cleanup, and the people that got to deal with all the tragedy of the bodies and the lives that were lost, and because you just throw out those terms, PTSD, and it can become so commonplace. But even those people, I mean, I know I would have dreams and dreams and dreams after having to do something like that. How do you shed that?
Yeah, and I don't think I haven't experienced that, and neither have you.
Yeah.
And so we can't relate to that. All we can do is try to understand it and support those people that are having to deal with it. And so, I thought about that this morning because, if you go to Facebook or you go to the news, there's a lot of repetition. And sometimes we get that repetition and we almost get irritated because, our society, by and large, is once is enough. Let's move on. This is one of those events where, frankly, the repetition needs to be there because, to begin with, there's a whole new generation of people out there that didn't experience. They're either too young or they weren't even born yet, and they need to relate to why it happened and what the ramifications of it were. And I read something this morning that said we need to go back like we were on the 12th. Everybody was the same color. Everybody had the same political persuasion. Everybody had, basically, we came together united as a people. And I thought that was probably the most succinct comment that I read this morning. So it's a time of reflection. I mean, that's really what it is.
It was amazing too, in the people of New York, and it was attack against the country and all this. But you watch what happened. It was really amazing because for me, you're talking about these benchmarks and the California earthquake, and watching the riots afterwards, and the carnage and the chaos, and to sit back and go, why?
Well,
and then this happens in New York, and it was kind of a real testament, I think, to the people of New York and stuff too, and to Americans because there were no riots. People didn't take advantage of the situation. Everybody was like, no way. And the flotilla of people that came in, of boats and stuff, that without any coordination, as soon as it happened, boats started heading for the island because they knew people were going to have to. I think over 200 fishing boats showed up to get people off the island. It's one of the unique stories that you don't hear about. It is just people came together, in an unbelievable way that's kind of unprecedented.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. What you talked about earlier with the earthquakes in California, or those are regional events, and they're things that we need to be sensitive to, but the difference here, this was a national event.
Yeah.
It just happened to happen in New York. And, by the way, Washington, D.C. and
Pennsylvania. All over, yeah.
And so, I mean, I had people I work with that travel a lot, and all of a sudden, the planes were all grounded. And so, I had a good friend of mine who was up in Anchorage for, I think, 7 days before they got him out of there. And somebody in South Dakota, and I mean, that type of thing. So it really affected things on a national basis. And then it was the beginning of security. I mean,
look at the things that came after that.
Look at the things that came after it. I mean, so and in rapid succession.
And then you can argue whether they were good or bad.
Yeah, we can argue that till we're blue in the face.
But it caused a lot.
But it caused a lot. That was the whole
Huge
point.
ripple effect.
I mean, even on the investment side, they started putting what we call circuit breakers in. So large events like that wouldn't really create chaos in the marketplace. And what they mean by that is that if stuff moves too fast and drops too much or goes up too much, either way, but normally drop, then it freezes the market for a period of time to allow the system to catch up with what's going on. I mean, and there's some situations where they've done that in the past, but that basically, things like that you'd never think of. I mean, it's just a different environment, and what I would hope that when people go throughout the day, they not only thank the people that protect our country, whether it's in the military or it's in the first responder side, but they reflect back to see how well we have it relative to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I was thinking that while you were talking.
Yeah, and even in today's environment, I mean, that's not that I've traveled a lot, but I've traveled a fair amount, and we really do have it pretty nice. We may not like it or whatever at certain times, but overall,
that's the tragedy of hate and war.
Right.
And you're right. We have it really good in America, and I told this to my kids before, and so when they were taking things for granted and stuff, but knew when they were old enough to understand, like when we were back in Baghdad, and I'm sure things are bad still, but it was really bad. And I said, imagine if you were a child in a country. And all you want to do is go out and go play. But every day, that noon siren we hear, that means get in the basement. Right. Something bad's going to happen. And imagine living a life with where PTSD is commonplace for you every day of your life.
Exactly.
So we do have it. And that's kind of what we hit too with Europe. Even experiences the terrorism a lot more than America has. We've been fairly insulated.
Yeah, we have.
And we do. There's a deterrent factor there too, because if you do something to America and we find out who you are, we're coming. And we're coming with the biggest guns on the planet. So there is a deterrent factor there. If you pick on us, we better not be able to find out who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old sleeping giant argument.
You poke me in the eye.
Yeah, poke me in the eye. But anyway, as far as 9/11 goes, I would encourage people to, the idea that time stood still is really true.
It is.
I mean, and if you were old enough to realize what was going on, I will guarantee you changed the way you looked at your life, and you changed the way life looked at you. I mean, you did, and that's why it's a lesson to be learned, I guess, and to keep it in mind. Mm-hmm. So there again, thanks to our first responders and our military.
Definitely. All right. Good day to remember and think about those things and thank those people that are out there sticking their necks out. Our local cops every day.
Exactly.
They go out there. Yeah. You think, it's just Chihuahua, but you never know when someone's going to pull a gun and shoot at you.
Right.
In that kind of job. So hats off. Hats off to all those people that go out there and risk their lives to keep everybody else safe.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
And for the innocents that tragically leave us because of hate and miscommunication and governments that can't get along. So, them too, right? Yeah. All right, so we've got a couple songs. The first one is called Hole in the World, and this is by the Eagles. Mm-hmm. And then we have one by Imagine Dragons, which we figured was maybe a little more our format, and it's simply called America. We checked them both out. Very nice songs. Here we go with the Eagles, and we're going to say goodbye for today because we ran long.
Okay.
I'm Scott.
I'm Mike, and take a moment to reflect.
Definitely. And you're listening to KCHW 102.7. Have a great day.